My name is Linda, and I live in California. I was only 10 years old when my mom died in a car accident. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The police officers standing on our doorstep, their faces grim, my grandmother's wail echoing through the house. My world shattered in an instant, and before I could even understand what had happened, I was sent to live with my Aunt Deborah, and my grandmother. At first, I thought I'd be safe. My aunt was family, and family is supposed to take care of you, right? But that wasn't how it worked in her house. From the very beginning, Aunt Deborah made it clear that I wasn't there as part of the family. I was there as an obligation. She had a daughter, Nicole, who was my age but couldn't have been more different from me. Nicole was the golden child, the perfect little princess who could do no wrong. Aunt Deborah would spend hours praising her. "Nicole is so talented," she'd say, or "Look at how well Nicole does in school." Meanwhile, I was treated like I didn't even belong. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way she made me work. While Nicole got to spend her afternoons at dance class or hanging out with her friends, I was stuck at home doing chores. Cleaning the kitchen, folding laundry, scrubbing the bathroom floors, anything Aunt Deborah didn't want to do herself. She used to call it helping out, but it wasn't helping. It was servitude. I was 10 years old, and she had me cooking dinner for the entire household while Nicole sat on the couch watching TV. If I ever complained, she'd snap, "You should be grateful we took you in at all." The worst part was how much she'd go out of her way to remind me of my place. If Nicole got a new dress, I got a hand-me-down. If Nicole brought home a B on her report card, Aunt Deborah would throw her a party. But when I brought home straight A's, all I got was, "Well, you should be focusing on the housework instead of school." And yet through all of that, it was my grandmother who gave me strength. She didn't say much, mostly because she was afraid of Aunt Deborah. But when we were alone, she'd hug me and whisper, "You're going to do great things one day, Linda. Don't let her break you." I didn't let her break me, but those years left their mark. I learned how to swallow my feelings, how to keep my head down, and just get through the day. I told myself that one day, I'd leave that house and never look back. One day, I'd have a life that was mine. And that's exactly what I did. But of course, Aunt Deborah wasn't done with me yet. It's been years since I left that house, and I finally feel like I'm living the life I always dreamed of. My name is on the lease of a cozy apartment in Los Angeles. I work at a marketing firm, and for the first time, I feel free. No one tells me what to do. No one dismisses me or makes me feel small. I've built a life that's mine, surrounded by people who actually care about me. But life has a funny way of dredging up the past when you least expect it. It happened on a Friday evening after work. I had just parked my car in a lot outside my apartment and was digging through my bag for my keys when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Linda." I froze. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it. But when I turned, there she was, Aunt Deborah, standing by the edge of the lot like some ghost from my past. She looked different. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, and there was a desperation in her eyes I had never seen before. "Linda, wait," she called out, hurrying toward me. I wanted to get back in my car and drive away. I wanted to tell her to leave me alone. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, clutching my bag, as she came closer. "Hi, Aunt Deborah," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "What are you doing here?" She sighed heavily, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. I need your help." I raised an eyebrow. "Help?" "It's your grandmother," she started, but then stopped herself, her face crumpling. "She kicked me out. Me, her own daughter. She let me go, but not Nicole. And now Nicole and her husband won't even take my calls. I have nowhere to go, Linda. I don't have anyone else to turn to." My heart twisted at her words, but not in the way she probably expected. For years, I had dreamed of the day she'd get a taste of her own medicine. And here it was, right in front of me, but it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. "What do you want from me?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. I just need a little help to get back on my feet," she said quickly. "Maybe some money for rent? Or groceries? Just until I can figure things out." I stared at her, my mind racing. This was the woman who made my childhood hell. The woman who treated me like a maid while praising her precious Nicole. And now she was standing in front of me, asking for my help because her golden child had turned her back on her. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I stood there, gripping my bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. My aunt's words hung in the air like smoke, choking me. "You're the only one who can help me, Linda," she said, her voice trembling, though I could hear the old familiar edge creeping back in. "I know things weren't perfect when you were growing up, but I was doing the best I could. You wouldn't understand what it's like to be a single mother, trying to keep things together." Her words hit me like a slap. The best she could. Was she seriously standing here, rewriting history, pretending that her cruelty was some kind of noble struggle? My chest tightened with anger. But then, as much as I hated it, guilt wormed its way in. This was still the woman who gave me a roof over my head after my mom died. She fed me, she clothed me, albeit begrudgingly. Could I really just turn her away? And yet, I couldn't ignore the other side of me, the part screaming, "Don't fall for it. Don't let her guilt you." I thought of all the nights I cried myself to sleep in her house, wondering why I wasn't enough to be loved. I thought of all the times she belittled me, made me feel like I was nothing. And now she was standing here, trying to manipulate me into helping her, just like she always did. "I really have nowhere else to go," she continued, her voice softer now. "Nicole doesn't even answer my calls anymore. Can you believe that? After everything I did for her, she just turned her back on me. But not you, Linda. You were always the kind one, the good one. I know you wouldn't leave me like this." Her words made my stomach churn. Kind. Good. Was this her strategy now? To butter me up, make me feel like I owed her something. I felt torn in two. Part of me wanted to give in, to hand her a few bills just to get her out of my sight and avoid the gnawing guilt that would come later. But the other part of me, the part that had clawed its way out of her house and built a life from the ground up, wanted to scream. "How dare you? How dare you show up here and expect anything from me after the way you treated me?" "You know," she said, her voice growing sharper, "you're doing well for yourself now. I can see that. You've got a nice car, a good job, a place of your own. It wouldn't kill you to help family, Linda. That's what family is for, right?" I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. "Family?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "You're going to stand here and talk to me about family? You treated me like a servant, Aunt Deborah. You made my childhood miserable while you spoiled Nicole rotten. And now, because she's abandoned you, you want to come to me and ask for help." She flinched, but quickly recovered, her face hardening. "I did what I had to do. You think life was easy for me? You think I had the luxury of coddling you? I gave you everything I could, Linda. If you can't see that, then maybe you're the selfish one." Her words stung, but not in the way she probably hoped. They stung because they reminded me of every time I let her walk all over me, every time I believed her when she said I owed her something. But not this time. This time, I wasn't the scared little girl she could manipulate. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at her. My aunt, this woman who had shaped so much of my pain, was trying to rewrite the story right in front of me. Her words, her tone, her entitlement, it was all so familiar. And yet, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the helpless girl who used to cry herself to sleep anymore. "Selfish," I repeated, finally breaking the silence. The word felt bitter on my tongue, but instead of anger, a laugh bubbled up in my throat. I couldn't stop it. I laughed. It wasn't loud or joyous. It was the kind of laugh that escapes when the absurdity of a situation is too much to take seriously anymore. She looked startled. "What's so funny?" I shook my head, still laughing. "You," I said, my voice sharper now. "You're unbelievable. Do you even hear yourself? You're standing here, asking me for help, calling me selfish, and acting like I owe you something. But do you know what I owe you, Aunt Deborah? Nothing. Absolutely nothing." Her face twisted in disbelief, her lips parting like she was about to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. "You treated me like garbage for years. You made me feel like I wasn't part of the family, like I was just some burden you were forced to tolerate. Do you remember that? Or have you conveniently erased all of that from your memory? Do you remember the chores, the screaming, the way you never once told me I did a good job, no matter how hard I tried? Because I do. I remember everything." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. For the first time, she seemed unsure of what to say. I stepped closer, the weight of my words building. "You want to talk about family? Fine, let's talk about family. Where was family when I was 10 years old, crying myself to sleep because my mother was gone and you made it clear I was nothing more than a nuisance in your house? Where was family when you gave Nicole everything, love, praise, encouragement, and left me with scraps? That's not fair, she finally spat, her voice trembling with anger. You don't understand what I went through. I did my best. Your best? I interrupted, my voice rising. No, Aunt Deborah, your best was cruelty. Your best was using a grieving child as free labor and then blaming her for not being grateful enough. And now, after everything, you have the nerve to come here and ask for help. She crossed her arms, trying to regain some control. You think you're so much better than me now, don't you? With your fancy job and your perfect little life. Well, let me tell you something, Linda. Life has a way of humbling people. One day, you'll meet someone and no one will be there for you. You'll see. That's when I felt it, a deep, unwavering calm. The guilt that had been gnawing at me moments before disappeared, replaced by clarity. I wasn't that scared, helpless girl anymore. I didn't owe her anything, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me again. No, I said firmly, meeting her glare. I won't see, because I've built a life surrounded by people who actually care about me. People who love me, who lift me up, and who don't treat me like I'm disposable. And you know what? That's what family is supposed to be. You taught me exactly what I don't want in my life. And I'm grateful for that. But I'm done. I'm done letting you guilt me, done letting you twist things to make yourself look like the victim. You want to call me selfish. Fine. I'll be selfish if it means protecting myself from people like you. Her face was red now, a mix of rage and disbelief. I can't believe this. After everything I did for you, this is how you treat me. You're heartless. Selfish. Just like Nicole. The mention of her daughter, her golden child, almost made me laugh again. Nicole, the one she worshipped, had abandoned her too. The irony was almost too much to handle. I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. You know what, Aunt Deborah? You're right, I am selfish. I'm selfish enough to put myself first for once, and it feels pretty damn good. She stared at me, stunned into silence, as if she couldn't believe I finally stood up to her. I turned and started walking toward the apartment door. My heart was pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins, but with every step, I felt lighter. Linda, she shouted after me. You'll regret this. One day, you'll regret this. I didn't stop. I didn't even look back. Her voice faded as I unlocked the door to my building and stepped inside, the weight of her presence finally lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. When I walked into my apartment that night, I stood there in the quiet for a moment, letting it all sink in. The confrontation with my aunt had stirred so many emotions: anger, sadness, even a bit of relief. But above all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself. I had said no, and I meant it. I wasn't the helpless girl she could push around anymore. I wasn't the kid who spent her nights scrubbing floors while her cousin got praised for just existing. I wasn't a victim. I was free.